Hello and welcome back. We are back for our final panel discussion of the day. It's been a busy day. Thank you, everyone that has tuned in, left a comment, shared on their stories. Um, so, we are going to be talking about representation in horror, the voices championing change. I am joined by an amazing wealth of amazing, talented people that I'm really excited to have this conversation with today. So, I'm just going to go around, get everyone to introduce themselves a little bit, and then we'll get into our full discussion for the day. So, I'm gonna pick on you to start with, Sam, because you're first on my screen. So, over to you.
Hello, I'm Sam Munster. I am a little neurodivergent, late diagnosed autistic ADHD gremlin. And physically, undiagnosed, but something ain't right. There's a whole lot going on. So to be part of this panel is absolutely amazing. And I'm a new ghoul as well, which is a lovely, lovely honor. So thank you so much for letting me take part in this today. Got some lovely, lovely faces to talk with. I'm excited.
Thank you for coming. And yeah, I'm sure we could all agree with being gremlins. I think it's just a general consensus. Val, what about you?
Hi, I'm Valerie Pullin, and kind of relatively new ghoul. I think I came in sort of 2023, and then back again. I'm always here for the working class and also more disability visibility. So that will be what I'll be shouting from the rooftops about today.
Thank you so much, Val, and happy to have you back at Ghouls, obviously. Riley, what about you?
Hey, I'm Riley. I am brand new to Ghouls with this resurrection here, and I'm a transgender woman, and I love, love, love horror, and I always have, and it's been so important to me for many reasons. But so I'm really excited to talk about that today.
Thank you so much, Riley. Yes, very happy to have you at Ghouls in our resurrection. Over to you, Rabia.
Sorry, my mute button got stuck because of White Out. My name is Rabia. I've been with the Ghoulies since 22, and very happy to be so. I am also late diagnosed autistic and ADHD or an ADHD, and I have several physical disabilities, some that impact my mobility as well and my overall constitution. And for diversity's sake, let me also name all my other intersectionalities. I'm queer, assigned female at birth, and I am a European-born African Asian Arab woman. Yeah, so that's me. A little bit of a unicorn when it comes to diversity, I guess.
We love a unicorn, you know, we love a unicorn. And we're glad to have you back as well, Rabia. And last but not least, Alex, what about you?
Thank you. I'm loving the sense of pride in these introductions. It's lovely. I'm Alex, they, them. I've been with the Ghouls essentially since the early days, but involvement patchy depending on life. Life is complex. I'm autistic, non-binary, and bisexual, so I kind of look out for all of those representations throughout my entertainment consumption. And I have a equally complex teenager as well, who's not here right now, but may well be watching from afar. That's essentially me. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. And yeah, always glad to have you back as well. So as you can see from our guests, we've got a very diverse collection of beautiful people here. So I'm really excited today to be talking about representation in horror, because I think one thing that we've seen across most of the panels that we've had today is that horror truly is kind of an outlet for us all, and truly just a way for us to kind of explore our identities, who we are, find ways to bring our voices and our perspectives on how we interpret horror. And I really wanted to just kind of, talk about how we're, the voices of championing change and using horror to our abilities, and also how we can better represent diversity across kind of horror in many different facets. So I'm going to start with my first question. What is it about the horror genre in itself that you feel is so inclusive? And I'm going to start with yourself, Riley.
Yeah, awesome. I'm happy to talk about that because I think that horror has always had the freedom to kind of strip away those cultural norms. Like by definition, horror kind of challenges what is and what ought to be, right? It's often dismissed as either like teenage summer fun or some like gross gore for perverts. Although that's been changing a lot recently with more of the like art house kind of horror. But the genre really has a way of like stripping the most basic human experiences down to their core. And I think that opens the way for a lot of different kinds of people to share their story. Like fear is sort of universal, right? And so is disgust and all of these different like emotions that horror evokes. But what creates that, like what evokes those things is kind of different for everybody. And you find yourself like relating to it in different ways. So yeah, I think that's one of the reasons I love horror is because of how inclusive it is, just like by its nature, because it exists to break boundaries.
I love that. Yeah, it's exactly that, isn't it? It's about breaking boundaries, kind of fighting against those taboos, which is, when we're thinking of diversity, that's exactly what we're aiming to do. And Sam, I'm going to throw the question over to you next.
I think no matter what like area of diversity we're representing, whether that is race, gender, a lot of us have probably felt like outsiders, and horror to me always seems to be the genre of the outsider. And whether that is seeing ourselves in the characters, whether that's seeing ourselves in the monsters for whatever reason, to me, it feels like the genre of the outsider. Even mainstream horror, there's a lot there that me, as all my little boxes I tick, I see myself reflected in. And even just the creators, they seem more diverse, more, I hate to use interesting as a descriptor because that seems like I'm tokenizing, but as a community, I feel like we're a lot more diverse, and the creatives and the filmmakers within that community seem to be a lot more diverse as well. So we're getting a really nice representation of a broad spectrum of people, but whereas I go to the cinema to watch a more mainstream film, I don't always see that representation for anything remotely interesting.
Yeah, I really like that you use the word interesting, because I think we've heard stories from the same people for a long time, and it's nice that now we're seeing stories from people that maybe actually we resonate more with, and are more representative of the diverse collection of us that enjoy horror. So that for me makes a lot of sense. And Alex, what about you? What's how do you kind of see horror as being inclusive?
You know me, I'm going to argue with the premise a little bit. I agree to the extent that horror calls to people who feel like outsiders. Sure, I resonate with that. But there's a difference between identifying as weird and living as people who are structurally minoritized or marginalized. Those are not the same. Difference between choosing outsider aesthetics, we are the weirdos and all that, and living the outsider realities. So the two don't necessarily match up. It's a lot of what we in this panel represent isn't there on the screen. It's sure it calls to us, but we don't necessarily see faces like ours or experiences like ours. It's growing, but I don't feel it much personally. I don't mind. I don't go to the cinema for that. I go for escapism. So that's cool, but I will argue with the premise.
And I think it's really good for us to also kind of have that argument there as well. And I think as we continue with our conversation, I've definitely got some questions on what we can do more to feel more inclusive within the genre. Val, I'm going to come to you next.
Yeah, so I always kind of I mean I've loved horror forever, and basically I've always been kind of, yeah, I suppose an outsider, again through circumstances. My family was always kind of like the Addams family. I've a severely disabled brother, and my mum's disabled as well, and so, but that was one of the things that I found within horror is, basically it always kind of represents what's going on in society at the time. It has this reflection, and it represents the conversations that people are having at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So I hate this phrase because people like when people are like, oh, it's being woke or whatever. Actually, no, it's just people are having more conversations about it. So it's reflecting what society is talking about right now, and that's really good, because then we get films like His House, where we talk about the immigration experience, and it's really exciting to see more stories and more voices like that, and also just a community. And I think somebody touched on it earlier. It's like it's a really inclusive and empathetic community. It's not perfect. There are a few gatekeepers or kind of whatever, but there's always got to be that in every single whatever you're into. And I always feel like in a safe space whenever I'm around other horror fans. And as somebody who finds it really, really difficult to sort of enter that group and strike up a conversation, I feel really comfortable doing that with other horror fans.
Yeah, the community is, again, we spoke about it quite a few times today, and I think the community is probably where maybe that inclusivity feels the most prevalent and is the most obvious to us. Even here, we all know each other, we're part of a community and kind of accepting each other. So I do feel like that's probably quite a big part of why we have that inclusive feeling. Rabia, what are your thoughts on kind of horror and inclusivity?
Well, I think it's interesting that, horror has always been this space within film, and specifically focusing on Western cinema in this case, where again, like Val mentioned, you see a reflection of things that is happening actually in society. Night of the Living Dead obviously is a really good example of this, right? You have a Black man that is surviving all of the zombies, everything else that is happening, and then dies because of racism, basically, at the end. I'm sorry if I'm spoiling that movie for anyone, but it's over a few decades old, so and that was happening during the social justice movement. That was happening during Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and you see that over the years that horror is basically, it's the most important of the genres, if you ask me, because it's the most expressive of all the genres. It encompasses all of the real feelings that people are feeling, either it be for, you can go towards escapism in the more science fiction-y or fantasy part of things, or the really down to earth, really raw and gritty stuff. And there's so many subgenres that feeds into everyone's needs for some catharsis, maybe escapism, but also expression. And I think expression, especially in horror, because it's seen, unfortunately, by a lot of cinema scholars as a more lowbrow part of cinema. Sorry, my cat is really enthusiastic here. Lowbrow part of cinema, which is not. And we always have in hindsight that things become like an important part of the zeitgeist, or that it was an important part of cinema history. Because it's seen as a lower brow, people get to experiment more. A lot of effects camera effects, storytelling methods, narrative structures were formed in horror because people were experimenting with how they could tell stories, which ways they could inflict emotion onto people. And I think because of that, that was also the first spaces where you could see representation happening before other genres caught up with that. I think there's still a very long way to go, especially in Western cinema. And we're slowly seeing more acceptance, and unfortunately politics, you know, influence this this growth or regression a lot. But if there's one space that at least allows for this to happen, it's horror.
I love the word that you use there around kind of expression, because I think that's actually probably a real big key to how horror is, you know, really allowing us to either tell stories through the horror that's on screen, or even, you know, for all of us here as creators and critics and people that, you know, talk about horror, how we can express ourselves through the medium of the films that we consume, which brings me really nicely into my next question. Is I'd love to know from you all, you know, with your kind of personal experiences and your personal perspectives, how you feel the horror genre represents you, and if there's any kind of films that you've connected with that have really like given you power, or you've felt seen and your kind of voice in those. So I'm gonna start off with yourself, Val, on that one.
Okay, sorry, I don't know why I'm so surprised every time you come to me. Sorry. Okay, yeah. So I am a 90s kid. I grew up like with Goosebumps and all those kind of stuff, and I spent a lot of time yay I spent a lot of time sort of sitting and reading on my own and stuff, and I think the films that really kind of gravitated to me was sort of the outsider goth girl. But yeah, so I really liked kind of like Nancy from The Craft, and I kind of understood her more than any of them. And also Rachel and Carrie too, The Rage. I you know, as a teenager, it was just a key thing to wanting to develop telekinesis to destroy all the bullies. So I was figuring it out, but and I really connected with Sissy in Rose Red. Rose Red is not perfect by any means. Obviously, the representation of her sister, who, as I mentioned before, names will go out of my head. The sister in it who is autistic. It's not a perfect representation. However, that home life of that she was dealing with, I fought extremely hard to get my brother out of that home, and he's in a care home now, and he's doing a lot better. I did see an article as well, which was kind of talking about how the character, the autistic girl, was kind of made to speak at the end, whereas I didn't really agree with that, because something that I saw with my brother is he was always labeled non-verbal, but when he's with people that he has a strong connection with, and with this new care home, he's got a really good base with, and it's kind of like almost living with flatmates. I love it. It's such a lovely care home. Like whenever we go bowling and stuff, some of them come with us and that, and yeah, but he actually proved that he can communicate perfectly well, and it's just all about listening and kind of forming bonds and connections. And so yeah, I really connected with Sissy in Rose Red, and I really felt seen with that, because like, I know it's going on YouTube, but Dad didn't handle things the best. And my mum, you know, dealing with her own sort of disabilities and stuff, very much kind of sat quiet in the corner, and that was literally my family. So that was one of the things I really connected with.
I've not seen that film, and similar to you, Val, you know, I've got a, you know, quite disabled brother too, so it's something I'll have to check out if it's, you know, resonated with you on that kind of level. So thank you for sharing that, Val. Alex, I'm going to come to you next.
Thank you. got some thoughts on this one. How I feel represented.
Or not.
In terms of those, yeah, it goes both ways. In terms of those three areas I mentioned at the start, being non-binary, bisexual, and the autism, not so much. And I can tell you about some issues I've got on all three of those. But there is a positive aspect as well. I can tell you where I do feel it. As a non-binary person, I've rarely seen myself naturally represented in horror. There's only been a couple of examples. The most prominent one was Theo Germain in They Them a couple of years ago. That one felt like it could have been me, except how unsexy they were. Felt quite desexualized, like the non-binary identity couldn't score, had no romance, had nothing like that at all. As though the writer didn't know how to do it for that kind of gender. I want non-binary characters to be desirable, messy, flawed, whatever, not just symbols. Lots more problematic characters in the bisexual arena, mind you, because they have been on the screen a lot longer, I think, but they're usually coded like destabilizing, destructive characters. A couple of decent examples that are not like that, but only just a couple, I think. I like it better when they are symbolic of free thinking rather than marriage wreckers, you know. The autistic ones are the worst, full of stereotypes or plot devices, or someone who is a burden, the most painful one being the child in The Triangle. I always warn people not to watch that if they're parents of an autistic kid. And for me, my problem as an autistic person watching cinema is just how much metaphor there is. It does not help me. I need clear information, clear stories. I can't read between the lines unless it's lines that I'm familiar with. But which might seem weird as a sometimes critic, but there you go. That is one of my downsides. But where horror does represent me is with my experiences rather than those characteristics. Motherhood, depression, experiencing trauma, that stuff. There's plenty of those in horror. There's a couple of films where I always cry at the end because of the mother experience. Donnie Darko and Hounds of Love. It's that one scene right at the end of each of them. If you know them, you know them. But it's the experiences. There you go. That's how I can relate.
Thank you, Alex. And I think you raise a really good point there about, you know, in certain regards, there not being the representation or the representation not being right. And I think we've seen for such a long time on screen stories about, you know, whether it's gender, whether it's identity, whether it's about race, written by people that frankly don't really get it, right? You know, men telling women's stories and so on and so forth, and us all going, but why? You have no idea what the actual experience is. And I think, you know, that is something that, you know, I think we're all screaming out for more of. And clearly, you know, Alex, you know, raised it there very, very well. Sam,
it's great to try, of course, and that's how it starts.
At least there's a try, you know, you can say that as a positive, but there's always more to be done for sure. Sam, what about you? How do you feel the horror genre does or doesn't represent you, and maybe some films that you've, you know, connected with?
With regards to like the ADHD side of myself, I don't see that represented in films, but that doesn't bother me because I think the neurodivergent experience is such an individual one to each person that there may be a film where there is representation that, you know, Alex might watch and see, oh, this feels like me. Rabia might watch and feel, oh, this feels like me, but then it doesn't feel anything like me because I think it's such an individual thing. with regards to being an angry woman, having lots of lovely representation of being an angry woman, love that. Representation of queerness. Horror is queer. We all know this. We're preaching to the choir, but horror is inherently queer, and seeing the amount of queer representation in horror now, for me, that feels something wonderful. What I really am enjoying as well is behind the films, I'm getting to know how many people there are in the horror community that are neurodivergent, but how many filmmakers are neurodivergent as well. And I feel like I'm still waiting a little bit for that to be represented. That's not a word. Represented into film. I see the way certain filmmakers and directors and things work, and I go, that person's neurodivergent. And then when I have that confirmed, I'm like, yes, I knew it. But I'm still waiting for some of those particular creators to put that neurodivergent experience onto screen. But then as a late diagnosed person, I'm still learning every day about neurodivergence and how that feels for me, how that looks to everybody. Like I said, is a really individual thing. But I think as more people like me and the lovely people here yap about their, individual disabilities, representing different parts of ourselves, I think more people will put that into their art as well. I'm not sure if I'm explaining myself very well, but in my head, I know what I'm trying to say and it's not coming out my mouth because yay. But that's something I really hope that we will see a lot more of. And like I said, I don't have a particular film that jumps out to me, but that's fine because I am a tiny little speck. And in the whole world of art, there's so many ways that you can, I nearly keep going to say representate again. How you can represent people and their different makeup. I'll put myself on mute now because I'm rambling without making any sense.
No, you're making a lot of sense, and I think taking from that is kind of your point around how we all interpret it differently and how we see ourselves in films differently. That's so important, right? Because that's the purpose of kind of diversity, is when we are so diverse, maybe one story of about something can't kind of fit the bill for everything, and for one person it might go, yeah, I feel like that's a fantastic representation of autism, for instance, and someone else might say, well, that doesn't represent my autism because it's very different. And that's where I guess we need to keep pushing for kind of the richness of these stories and more of them as well. And I also have to just go back to your point on horror is queer. Absolutely, that's one thing I think we're all like, yes, let's keep pushing that. No one else can tell us otherwise. Rabia, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm agreeing mostly with everything that's being said right now. For me, it's kind of weird because I live between so many different cultures. My mom's Indian, my dad's Egyptian. I grew up with Turkish and a Japanese step family, so I come from like a lot of different cultures. Indonesian step family as well. So, for me growing up, definitely things like Goosebumps and The Craft spoke to me because I was that weird girl and I didn't know I had ADHD, so I was kind of acting I was very othered by people, not only because of my skin color and my normally very curly hair, but on top of that I dressed differently, I had different food at lunch, and then I felt at home with these outsiders in Western horror stories. But then I also had the luck, I would say, to being immersed also in Asian horror a lot while growing up. And it's something that's very normalized in a lot of Asian countries to grow up around horror. It's not seen as an outlier when it comes to genres, but something that everyone watches. It's part of our bedtime stories. It's part of our regular conversations. So, and a lot of people have already heard me tell this story, but my first interaction with horror was my aunt and my mom in the living room watching The Thing, and that's what was on TV, and that's how I, as a 6-year-old, watched The Thing. And to this day still my favorite horror movie. So it was very normal. Like, you didn't turn things off. Like, my cousins would watch Hellraiser when I was 8 and I would be in the room, but they would also watch these weird Thai movies or like the Japanese horror that would come out around that time, and I would just sit around and watch those. And what I found interesting in a lot of those stories is that obviously there's a lot of folkloric stuff that came out, that was part of it, a lot of mythological stuff that was part of it, but also how women became stronger beings in these stories through the curse, through becoming the ghost or the demon, and then pulled back some autonomy in their lives, which culturally for a lot of these different countries back then especially was really hard. I mean, 80s, 90s, early 2000s kid and teenager, and there was a lot of talk when I was younger, when I was 16, that arranged marriage, is that happening? Luckily it did not, but and I think when I'm looking at modern horror, a lot of people know this title Bulbul that came out on Netflix, was a really nice representation of it's the setting of a trail. It's a setting of, a woman that becomes something to protect others, but also herself. And, that the little bit of autism that comes into play of like, having this innate sense of justice, like not just for yourself, but you want that for everyone equally. And that's what I found really nice in Bulbul. At the same time, I feel that a lot of representation is still missing, especially in Western horror cinema. I think it mostly also has to do with who invests in movies getting made. You can tell that, Ryan Coogler, he made a movie about decolonization, and he had Asian people in his film, which is, periodically correct for that time. The way they were portrayed made sense. He had people consult on that. And I would love to see more of that, basically. I know that he does that very well. I mean, in this Black Panther movie, he had the Jabari clan, be followers of the Hindu god Hanuman. Sorry, I was thinking of words. Hanuman, the monkey god, and they're vegetarians because of that. So those are like intricacies that I can then feel like, oh, okay, this is, someone thought about this. Someone actually sat down and thought, okay, there's an actual people with actual cultural values. We're not going to appropriate this. Let's put this down properly. And I think whether it's gender, race, disability, I'm more than just being Asian, Arab, or African. I'm more than just my disability, and I'm also more than just my gender. And I would love to see within horror people writing from that perspective, but also when they're writing about these, putting all these intricacies in. If you have a character in a wheelchair, don't let their whole personality and character be that they're in a wheelchair, because this still happens, unfortunately. If they're autistic, don't just grab one part of the spectrum and go like, oh, all autistics are high special need and not independent. There's so many different types. It's a spectrum, right? So I think that representation really comes when we start telling our own stories, but also when people start respecting each other's stories as well. And that's still missing for me today. But we're getting there slowly. I think more and more voices are getting there. And the best way to get it done is to vote with your wallet, I guess.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that point, doesn't it, Val? And I really like what you're talking about, kind of, the consultation that Ryan Coogler did, because it seems like it should be quite an easy solution, right, to ask people about their true lived experience, to find these details that actually do really help to provide accurate representation, and not just go, oh well, I think that it would be represented like this, with no kind of background knowledge on it. And that's definitely where you start to see stories come to life that feel a lot more authentic in what they're talking about and in their portrayal, for sure. And Riley, for you, kind of, what about the horror genre? How do you feel represented or not, again? And if there's any films that you think?
Yeah, well, first I want to touch on something I think that Sam was saying about the neurodivergence in film, because I'm also ADHD, and it's something that I think it's everybody does have a very different experience, so it's kind of hard. Like one of the only like shared experiences that I've come across is the how much it sucks to exist in a world that's built for neurotypical people, right? But I mean, outside of that, like what trans girl hasn't connected with I Saw the TV Glow? That's one that I saw before I even knew what was going on with me, and I had no idea that it was about like the trans experience at all. And you know, for some reason I was like, I really connect with this movie. Like why does this speak to me so much? But yeah, I mean, horror's always been a part of my life. I also grew up with Goosebumps, got the shirt. I've got a little collection going on back there. And like the first time I got in trouble for swearing was because I repeated something that Ash said from Army of Darkness. Like I was young, I was in it. Like recently though, this is a movie that I will shout from the rooftops every chance I get, which is The Substance. Stuck with me like so much. It's such a perfect melding of all the things that I love about horror. It's got the spectacle, the mirror that it holds up like to the audience, the human connection, the absurdity of it all, and it wraps it up in such a beautiful package that I feel like that is a movie that has something for a lot of people to relate to. And yeah, like again, it represents so much of what I love about horror. But yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, I Saw the TV Glow has actually come up multiple times today, and I think, and again, I think it's, you know, I think the reason for that is because it is a really well-made film that obviously does represent, like you said, you know, the trans experience. You know, the director has really kind of nailed what they're trying to say, and it's seeing that paving that kind of filmmaker paving the way for stories that we want to see on screen, which leads me nicely into my next question, and kind of thinking, I guess, a little bit from the point of, you know, the films that we see on screen, but also very much from a creator point of view, how we kind of are bringing representation to the forefront. And I want to know from you all, and Robbie, you touched on it, you know, briefly a minute ago, do we think that there's enough representation on screen, and how do we kind of think that our voices as, you know, neurodivergent people, as queer people, etc., you know, how do we feel like our voices in this realm is helping to kind of push what we need in terms of representation? And I'm going to start with you, Rabia, because you touched on it briefly in your previous answer.
Yeah, no, so like I mentioned before, I think it's nice that we make up such a large part also of the people that are consuming horror. Earlier on, someone mentioned that, you know, part of community within horror, although it's not perfect, is the fact that you can come in. I think it was Val who mentioned it. You can come in and you can be, you know, a little bit awkward, but there's always points of connection that you can find. Everyone's a little bit neurodivergent. Some might be disabled as well. There's something you can connect with, and there's always like the one movie that you mentioned, and then someone will be happy to talk to you about it, right? And I think that, you know, within the community, there's a lot of people that are represented. It's just that we need to start seeing it on the screen. And I feel that the people that are currently financing films, there's a lot of representation if you look at shorts, at independently made films. But when it comes to the big screen, blockbusters, heavily financed films, there's just still too little representation on all levels of all the spectrums of intersectionalities that we're talking about. And it really has to do, again, like I mentioned, with the political climate, how we vote with our own money. If we give more money to bigger studio films, they feel that they've done right. So giving money to a film that does it right and awarding them with buying a ticket is better. than going to a movie that isn't doing it right, a lot of the times. And it's hard because we live in this time where there's so many big players that have so much control. But I think that also because of that, we need to start investing more in independent makers, and also start looking at other places in the world. Like I specialize in Asian horror specifically, because I'm from the continent culturally and from my background, obviously. I grew up around a lot of Asian horror. And it's 60% of the world population. I mean, they have a lot of things to say. They have a lot of representation that already comes there built in. Although Indian society, for instance, can be very homophobic, queer and trans representation is very, very present in their films and in their filmmaking, and especially also in their horror filmmaking. Same for the Japanese. They are very conservative. Same for the South Koreans, very conservative in real life. But when it comes to filmmaking, they're very open to having sapphic stories, to having queer stories, to having trans stories, and have those be part of the mainstream things that they have come out, because the public accepts it. So even though it's something that is still taboo on a like daily life layer, they've already accepted it in their media and their entertainment consumption. Whereas here in the West, it's the other way around. Well, it's not completely as accepted, obviously, but we have a bigger problem with seeing all these representations on screen, it seems, almost, especially when it comes to these mainstream and blockbuster films and series. And in real life, it's easier to find your grouping and find community within your your intersectionalities. So yeah.
Absolutely. And Riley, how do you kind of see, from like a creative point of view, around, is there enough representation? What could we do to kind of support this?
Yeah, no, I mean, first of all, I don't think that there ever will be enough representation, because first of all, there's new people every day. There's going to be people that have identities and stuff that we don't even think about right now, but I think that one of the ways that we can like push representation forward is not only allowing space for creators from all backgrounds, but really highlighting like people from marginalized backgrounds, and really like making a conscious effort to say, hey, look at this really like cool thing, like Robbie, I think, is doing a great job by getting me super interested in like, oh, I really want to go check out more of this Eastern horror, and also like somebody mentioned the wheelchair thing not being a central point. Like, can we have people just be queer without it being a thing, without it being a defining like character? Like, I really want to see that just a trans final girl where her being trans has nothing to do with the plot, and that's just but I do think that one of the good things, one of the only good things to come of social media, is the independent creators being given a lot more space to do our thing. Like, when you cut out that studio middleman, you find a lot more people connect with a lot of different things, and it's not just this lowest common denominator thing that we've been given. And so I think that it's important to again show that we're interested in that stuff, and doing things like we do is a really good way to do that, of writing about it, talking about it, getting things out there, and just keep doing that.
Love your point on like having these representations, but it not being the sole focus of the character or the film. People can exist without it being, as you said earlier as well, Ravi, it's not the whole personality of someone. Alex, I'm going to come to you next on this question.
Okay. Well, partly I want to agree with a couple of things that have been said already. A person's identity is an ordinary part of who they are, not the plot device in an ideal world. That's what I want to see going forward, and to see inclusion as part of a natural way of writing rather than something bold or a daring thing to do. But I think I think we need to be patient with the film industry as well, mind you. Even in mainstream cinema, not horror, it's only a few years ago that a mainstream production company put out a queer romance film, which was Love, Simon, just a few years ago. That was the first one from a mainstream company. It filled cinemas. The market was ready for it. Others will follow, I think. Other representation. So let's gradually push them forward, but be patient at the same time. Okay, problems there. That one erased the bisexual characters from the book, but whatever. Okay. Enough representation? No, of course not. There are so many more films coming out all the time, though. So surely other people can be represented. We had a ghost story from the point of view of the ghost a couple of years ago. One from the point of view of a dog. We can have one from the point of view of an autistic person. You know, it's doable. But there is more and more happening. We had Asian American families being central to presence, to They Live in the Grey, and that was a natural part of the story without being mentioned as plot devices in those senses. So again, other characteristics will develop in the writing. Let's keep on encouraging it step by step.
Love that. Encouraging and you know, I think you've got a nice point there around kind of, you know, patience as well. We're getting there, you know, we can keep pushing it, but these things do take time, you know, as with everything. We'd love to see it all tomorrow, but sometimes to do it right, a little bit of patience goes a long way to make sure
and
it's done
when it happens.
Exactly. I'm going to come to you next, Val.
Yeah, so I just kind of want to echo what everybody said, and I've been nodding furiously, which, yeah, I think there is a good amount. It's definitely getting better. But yeah, I mean, we're still not there, and I don't think we will ever be there, as everyone said previously. I think there needs to be more voices added, and but I think one of the things I've kind of realized as well with creators is it's about also just access to funding, access to knowledge as well, in terms of how to be able to make these films, and who do, you know, if a kid's written a script, who do they give that script to? You know, do they have the support group or teachers or whoever that they need to be able to get their voice out there? And I think one of the things that we've definitely realized in the last few years, especially when people were kind of having to you know, attend school from home and stuff, it's not everybody's got a laptop. That was a really big thing. And then also there's still a lot of barriers being put in, you know, like disability like access and stuff like that. But I think in terms of so, you know, we need to it needs to be made, this is the wrong word, and it needs to be made clear. It's probably a better way of phrasing this, but for kids who want to do this, who want to share their voice and their experience, who maybe feel like they can't, there needs to be a way to sort of let them know, like, okay, this is how you can do it, this is how you can get funding, this is how you can maybe get sponsorship, or, you know, like my kind of route into it was learning about student loans and getting to university, and I essentially just ran away to London. So, you know, but yeah, like it's about that knowledge and funding. And also I think in terms of creators as well, I think it's really important to put these people into those roles. So I've written down their names because, again, bad at names, but Millicent Simmons in A Quiet Place, you know, somebody who is actually a deaf actress, having her and being able to see American Sign Language on screen, and that inclusion as well during the award ceremonies and everything as well. You know, they should carry that on. I'd love seeing somebody doing BSL and ASL on stage, because it should be. It's for everybody. It's being broadcast. Like, widen your audience, please.
Mhm.
And also, I watched Bogonia the other day, and I was so happy to see Aidan Delbis, and he's an autistic actor. And I looked into a little bit about him, and basically found out about there's a theatre group in LA called the Miracle Project, and having these projects, being able to elevate voices, are so important, and I'm here for it. But that's what we need, essentially.
Yeah, I really agree. I remember watching a TV show not that long ago. It wasn't horror. And they had an actor in a wheelchair, and I was like, "Oh, that's great representation." And then I went and checked, and they were a fully able-bodied actor, and I was like, "That's, to me, frankly, quite disgusting." I was like, "There's absolutely no reason to do that." I was like, "There's lots of absolutely talented." Actors with disabilities, like you mentioned, Val. I also watched Begonia, and I was really, really happy to see that. I sent it to my brother, who's autistic and loves acting. I was like, wow, and he was like, oh wow, I didn't know autistic people were allowed to act in films. And I was like, I was like, of course, So I think it's us, having actual people that represent that on screen is so important. And really, it's I don't think it's that difficult to be doing that. So it's great to see, the filmmakers that are. And Sam, finally over to you on this question.
A really nice recent example saying about characters not being defined by their whatever is Rabbit Trap by Bryn Cheney. All three characters in that film are neurodivergent, and that was not immediately apparent to me, but the more I thought about the film and looked into discussion and things, and it's been confirmed by Bryn, they are all neurodivergent, and that was lovely because it's not mentioned once, and it's just a part of the film, and that was a really nice representation. I think it was Mitch, hi Mitch, who said on one of the pinned comments about like being those voices and pouring that out into the world, and that will translate into cinema and art. I think we're at risk a lot of the time of sort of shouting into an echo chamber. I know my social media, I know the media I consume is very queer, it's very non-binary, it's very neurodivergent, it's all these things, because that's what I want to see in the world. So what I see coming back at me reflects what I put out into the world. So I think the more we keep talking about these sorts of things, we never know who we're going to reach. It might be that 99 of the 100 people that you reach in are the same as you, but that one person then may go, oh, okay, I'm going to go and learn about that a little bit more, or that's an interesting story. I'm going to go and see what that's all about. And I think it feels, to me, a lot of the time, it feels like I'm being that annoying person who's talking about being neurodivergent all the time, and I'm just like, shut up, I hear myself. But then when I get feedback from people who say, oh, you talking about your experience has made me feel more comfortable to talk about my experience, or I've gone on to learn about this, I think, oh, that's fucking brilliant, well done me, little pat on the head, because you don't know who that one person you might reach will be. And I think the more of us, as much as we feel like we're fucking going on about stuff all the time, the more we use whatever platform we have, whether it's a teeny tiny one or a huge platform, to pour it out there and just keep seeing and speaking about what you want to see. And I think that will gradually translate into, like you said, with like creators, I'm seeing more in the indie horror scene of more of the queer films I want to see, more of the neurodivergent led films I want to see. There's so many other intersectionalities that we're not seeing as much representation from. But again, that's probably on me because I don't see myself reflected in those experiences. So perhaps I don't seek those as much. And I really would like to push myself more to find out more about horror from people of color, people from different religions and different backgrounds. And it's a what's the word? Education thing. It's an education thing that we just need to all educate ourselves on different worldviews. And I'm as guilty of consuming white British, white Western media as anybody. So I need to push myself a little bit more and sort of get out of that little box. And I think everybody needs to. So I'm not sure where this rant is going, but yeah, we all just need to, I think, keep on being ourselves. We're all wonderful people. And hopefully, you know, people listening now, I'd imagine, say about an echo chamber, most of them are sort of ticking a lot of the same boxes that we do. And I say that in a respectful, nice way. But there may be somebody watching who goes, oh, okay, I didn't know about XYZ. I'm going to go learn more about that. And I hope they do. Sorry, that was a big ramble.
No, we're here for it. And I think actually, you know, one thing for me is, you know, we've spoken a lot today about kind of films and filmmakers, etc. But, you know, I think something that I've come to realize is, you know, here in a room with you all is listening to your voices. You know, we're all people that have got you know, marginalized voices, that have these different perspectives that can give you a different view on why a film is maybe representative or maybe it's not so representative. And I think, you know, also seeking out other outlets, you know, there's been a few mentioned on film festivals such as Access Horror. There's also, you know, places like Night Tide magazine, other magazines and podcasts, and people that are championing, going, hey, here's, you know, these amazing critics and writers like all of yourselves that come from, you know, vastly different backgrounds with vastly different perspectives, and can say, actually, have you ever looked at the film in this way? Or even just, you know, pushing for the change that we want to see. And I think that's really where, you know, a lot of the future of this is going. And hopefully, you know, with conversations like this one and more, that we can, you know, be those voices that do help to see the change in horror that we hope to see in the future. I mean, I'd love to speak to you all about this more and more, because again, it's a topic that needs more attention. We need to keep talking about it. I'm sure I'm going to ask you back for another panel at some point, because I truly do feel that there's, you know, more to be discussed. But we're gonna wrap up for today because it's late. We've overran a little bit, but this has been a really insightful conversation. So I just want to thank you all for taking the time and, you know, sharing your perspectives on everything. So if you want to let people know where they can find you, where they can read your writings, which obviously, again, if you're watching this and you do go, oh, I want to learn a bit more about any of the topics that were discussed here today, then you've got a panel here of amazing people that write from their own perspectives. And you can, you know, as you said, Sam, you know, a bit of an education piece by reading the work and listening to the work of the people that, you know, bring those perspectives. So let's go around, share where people can follow you, and also any plugs that you'd like to make as well. So I'll start off with you, Sam.
Best place is Instagram at sam.munster. Oh, I love that. Be the horror you want to see. That's great. I am a horror. Sam.munster. There's link in the bio there to all the other places, including my podcast, Horror Hyperfixations, where I talk about horror through a neurodivergent lens. So I've spoken to other neurodivergent people about their love of horror, but also neurodivergent creators as well, which I've really enjoyed doing, and listening to how they talk about making their own films, writing their own films is really cool. It's one of my favorite things I've ever done. And be a ghoul, obviously, is one of my favorite things.
Thank you so much, Sam. Val?
Yeah, I should have wrote these down. Okay, so my Instagram is Metal Circus 13, and I mostly am just on there. And you can look at what films I'm watching on Letterboxd, which is Misfit Sister. And yeah, I'm doing some writing for Ghouls, and I want to do more. My confidence is just kind of coming back after a little period of crippling anxiety. So please, I want to speak more and do more. And thank you again, Zoe, for opportunities. I really am grateful as well, just because you welcome a lot of voices, and yeah, I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Val. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you. I'm not terribly active with social media and don't understand Instagram, but when I do that kind of thing, it's Twitter, Alice Class 71. When I write these days, it'll be for Ghouls magazine, previously Horror Obsessive, 25 years later, and Ready Steady Cut.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alex. Rabia?
I'm on a lot of social media, but mostly active on Instagram and Blue Sky. You can find me anywhere and everywhere if you type in RPISH or RPish. I write for the Ghoulies, so you can find me on Ghouls Magazine. Other than that, also on horrormovieblog.com and theculturedcurators.com. I'm also on the Cultured Curators podcast. That's me and Benjamin Frankenberg. We're two perverts with a podcast that are horror obsessed. So if you're interested in that, and that's part of the horror spectrum, then you're very welcome to come join us in our talks about slippery things and tentacles. Other than that, what else? Yeah, you can find me at Imagine Fantastic Film Festival and Kaboom Animation Festival, and just follow me online. I'll probably show you all the different places where I'm at, either speaking or writing or otherwise. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rabia. And Riley?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at foxonthefence_. Fox like the animal and on the fence. Other than that, you'll see me writing on Ghouls. You'll see me, my name is Riley Jane Fox, and I'm also, I don't have it up yet, but I will be starting a Substack because I've got a few really cool, really gross trans body horror short stories to post. So keep an eye out for that.
That sounds awesome. Thank you so much, Riley. And thank you again, everyone, for a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much to everyone that has joined in today. This is our last panel of the day. Again, it's been a busy day. It has been amazing. Thank you for tuning in, for sharing your comments. Please do share the links to all of the YouTube videos for anyone that you think might enjoy it and didn't get to watch it. We're going to be getting together in about 40 minutes at 8 p.m. GMT. We're going to be doing a horror quiz over on Zoom. It's the first quiz I've ever hosted, so I'm a little bit nervous. It might be an absolute shambles. It won't come up anything against Mitch from Soho Horror Film Festival's notorious quizzes, unless I drink far too many drinks, and then maybe Mitch, I might just rival you in best quiz host, but let's see. But again, thank you so much. You can follow us Ghouls Mag on Instagram, or you can head to ghoulsmagazine.com to find everyone's writings and works, and I'm sure we'll be back soon with more panel discussions. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.